As an executive, you have more information than the casting director a lot of times. You have, like, I've heard that second season pitch out while we're starting our first season. I've heard where this is going before that. So now I understand, which might not be information I'm giving the casting director right away, or might not be information that they're getting, but I know a little bit more of the bigger picture. So a lot of times that best read becomes, this is the best read of this side of the script of what we're looking for. But in the long run, it won't get us to where we are, because this becomes the bad guy in season 2, and you just don't know that.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to our lovely panel for taking the time today. They're a little nervous, so just... But, okay, great. So... this is a really interesting and wonderful opportunity, because I think a lot of people don't understand what the difference between casting executives and casting directors are. So we're going to kind of dissect that a little bit today. And so I guess the first question, what is your guys' emails? I know that you guys really wanted that, especially you. So, but okay, great. So I think, let's just get right down into it, you guys. What is the main difference between a casting director and a casting executive?
Well, I think the great thing is that I think all of us have had worked in a casting office before we became executives. So I think we clearly understand what the distinction is. A casting director is, honestly, I always consider them like they're on the front lines. Like they're the people who are they're working closely with the producers and the directors to, make lists, actually handle the auditions, taped auditions, in-person auditions. And as casting executives, we work closely with our casting directors, our studio partners who produce the shows, our own colleagues, and I said the producers too, right? And so it's a little bit more of a kind of a macro view, whereas I always feel like, so we've got a lot of people we're managing and talking to, whereas the casting director is really, I think, just focused on the producers and showrunner and writers. I don't know, is that fair?
Yeah, and I think also casting executives, we're kind of representing the network or the studio that we're at, wherever that is for anyone, in the casting process, where everything comes into us and we kind of funnel that to the people that it needs to get to, kind of like Grace mentioned. But we are the face of the network or the studio when it comes to the casting process.
There's a lot of politics behind as well, right? That you guys have to learn and manage. Can you guys talk a little without getting you guys in trouble? But because there's a lot of decisions that have to be made internally, with the studio before it even comes to us casting directors. Can you talk a little bit about what that's like? Like the conversations with your studio executives, for example, and then you have to relay those things to us. What does that look like?
I know. I'm trying to think. I know what you're asking. I feel like we're now in a time, certainly, where there's a lot of transparency in conversations, and I think if you're asking, are you specifically asking do we have to kind of manage network mandates versus what a creator wants? Is that what?
Not necessarily. Because I think that a lot of the actors here don't understand that a lot of the stuff are done at the studios, before they even come to us. A lot of conversations.
I think since we're working at the network and studio level, a lot of the conversations we're having are very high level based on what kind of show we're making. What is it that we're looking for? What is it that we're hoping to accomplish here? So that navigation really is for us as the casting brain to digest that and get that back to our casting director partners and our producing partners and everyone that's making the show, so that the vision that the network wants or the studio wants is being met.
One of the fun things that a lot of people, don't really know is that the list making, for example. So even for us casting directors, we have to create lists for our leads, for our series regulars, and sometimes you guys help us out with that, So can you guys tell them a little bit about what that requires when you're brainstorming for a list, say for a series regular or a lead?
I think that's where a lot of the experience that I had prior to joining the network comes in handy. Having worked at Marvel Studios with Seraphin Casting for 10 years, I'm very accustomed to making these lists about, who's particularly right for this movie. Is it a star name, or is this going to be a discovery, or are we going to be reading folks? Sort of thinking about who would be right, who would be the right fit for this. And for the most part, it's very creative. It's very, we work with them on the tone they're trying to accomplish, and also we think about our audiences, and we want to serve them and make sure that they're seeing the folks that they like, as well as making sure that it's serving the piece.
And I'm feeling my psychic connecting with somebody here who's wanting to ask, so how do people make it on those lists? Can you talk about?
I think it's very subjective, because it's funny. I feel like sometimes agents ask, like, they do feel like there's some like secret list that we keep that is, that is just like people on that list are just magic and everyone else is not. But that's like, to me, like, list making is such a specific like creative process that is inspired by what, the material that you're reading, maybe inspired by, a conversation that you had, with your colleagues in development or with your boss who runs the network, just saying, I feel like this is what we're missing. This is the kind of talent that we should be going after. This is the kind of person that would elevate our shows. It's, so it's very subjective. It's very, inspired by, what it might maybe informed, frankly, by a show that's working on the network. And you think, well, I want to figure out what I compare that with. So what else feels, that there's some connective tissue. So there really isn't, like, I promise you, there's not like a list of, I feel it's funny. Like, I feel like maybe when, back in the day, or even like the way that agents have like their client lists, they'll have like, honestly, like, male, female, whatever. Now, I mean, so much more inclusive, but like, then they'll have like, 20s, 30s, 40s. So like, there are lists organized by like that, but I feel like for us on the casting side, we don't have lists that are that forensic, because it's so inspired by what the role and the, and the needs are at that moment. Does that?
Yeah, and I think a lot of times those lists become thought starters too. So you can have a conversation about, because again, since we're working with the network and the studio and we're working at that level, when we're making lists, we want to be like, is this what you're thinking about? Is this the kind of person that you want in this role? Is this the kind of the way you're thinking about it? And a lot of times they're like, no, or yes. Today I had a meeting that was like, is it this? And they're like, that doesn't feel right because they don't have this, or that feels right because they have more of this. So it's helpful. That's kind of where we're starting to kind of put it together, because then we want to bring on a casting director to kind of help elevate that and keep pushing that forward. But that's another function of the list.
It's changed a lot, over the years. It really has. And it's so creative now because there's so much content out there. So just to give you guys an idea, like, we'll get a show and then they'll say, we're looking for an action, star who's male, 40s, and then they'll say the magic word, we want it to be diverse for whatever reason, or we want somebody that means something in the Latin American market. So there's just so many things, and then we have wonderful creatives to help us out. Usually we casting directors are the ones that are making those lists, and we present them to them, and they say, great, awesome. And then once in a while, somebody like Cesar will be like, okay, well, what about, so-and-so? That could be interesting if we have that kind of relationship, but it's a lot of fun. I personally like it a lot. Can you walk through us what, like, just so they get an idea, what does your day-to-day look like?
Gosh, my day-to-day, like, I feel like the minute I get to my office, and I do, most of us are in a hybrid model. I probably in the office more than not, but it's like, is looking at emails, responding to emails, looking at my calendar, and just anticipating an actor meeting. And I'm just starting to do more in-person actor meetings. There's still a lot of meetings on Zoom. And then usually there's some kind of a casting concept meeting where we're talking with a showrunner and a studio and a casting director, and then basically, talking sort of like what Cesar was saying, identifying prototypes, talking through ideas, just so we can, start to like make kind of a short list of, are we going to make an offer? Is this something that we're going to be, just sort of cast a wide net and see who you respond to in sessions. So, and then, I feel like it's just, and repeat, it's just sort of all of, that's usually what, and then you look up and it's like, oh, it's 6:30 or 7, whatever it is.
Yeah. Similar here, it's what is the day to day? What's today, what projects are we on now. I think also, like you, Grace, and we have teams that we're also managing. So that's another, is managing multiple groups, being a resource to them. So I think that's another part of it. And then also doing that actor outreach, going to showcases, watching a lot of TV and film to make sure that we're up to date with who's out there and who are people that we want to work with, that we can identify for our teams.
And I'll add that on top of that, at least for me, there's a lot of reading. We have so much material that's constantly coming in, new drafts of series across the entire platform, tons of reading. Still will click in and watch a bunch of the dailies and sometimes the cuts. I do watch the cuts that come in. So, the day-to-day is in flux based off of that. It's the emails. It's like, what email did I get that I have to take care of right now?
This is one of my favorite things to ask as well, the approval process, because we know things that we do, just so you guys know, like if we're working on a studio project or anything like that, we do have to go through approval. So we casting directors don't have final say. We talk to our creatives, we talk to our producers, we talk to our directors, and if it's something for one of these guys, like I have to go to them and say, for your approval, and then they take a look at it. So can you guys talk to us about what that looks like and what that entails?
I'm wondering if it's like different at our places, but it's really, the approval process is, we try to make this as like collaborative and painless as possible for ultimately our creators, because they're the ones who, have to like go and make these shows. And so basically what we do is ideally I like to get if we're making an offer, a short list of names that I can then discuss with my development team and with my boss, who's the head of the network, and then just discuss, do we like these ideas? Is this order? Does this feel right? And it's really an open dialogue where sometimes people feel like, I feel like they're on the wrong track. Let's bring them in for another meeting and discuss. But then, or sometimes if we just, they cast a wide open net and they send us an audition, then in the old days it was great, we would actually see people live in the room, and we would have the producer, the studio, and the network teams all sitting there watching, an audition, and then the actor would leave, and it was great because we could have a conversation in real time because we were all watching the same performance. But again, it's so subjective because people respond differently, and so that's, then you have a discussion in the room. Now it's really watching more taped auditions, and we all collectively will discuss, what do we think? Do we feel this is the right choice? And certainly as the casting person, I always have a point of view. And so I always want to, I feel like I always want to speak to, does this serve the role as written? And also, does this make sense for us as a network? Does this feel on brand for, the other shows that we're promoting? Is this someone that frankly we think marketing will be excited about promoting? There's so many pieces to that puzzle that we discuss. So it's never like uniform what the discussion process is, but it's a version of all those scenarios.
Yeah, I think also for it's collaborative. We do have to, with our creative partners, we talk to them and say, this is what we think. You have to have a strong point of view, because if you don't have a point of view, I don't think anyone will have a point of view. So that's that piece. And also we're really, on my end, with my team, we're really pushing, is this the show we want to make? Is this the choice, and is this the conversation you've had with your creatives about the show you want to make? Is this the world we're creating? And there has been pushback sometimes because there is a feeling of, this isn't the world we're building, and it might be the first approval, and it sets off, the rest of the show. But I do think things go into it of, there are budget conversations, there are all that stuff, but it doesn't take away from a great performance. I think if something comes in that's undeniable, it's undeniable, and if it's the right thing for the role. But I don't think approvals are something that we're never pushing to not approve stuff.
No way.
No, like I would love to approve every single thing that comes in, right? I think that's the thing. Our goal is to make sure that everyone has all the information. Grace mentioned a casting concept call where you have that conversation about, this is a world we're making, this is what we're expecting, this is what we want, so that the casting director doesn't have to go back and do the work again. Because they're the ones doing the work. They're the ones on the ground. I spent time at a casting office before going into the executive side, and I know what it takes to cast a show. It's not just, you have to see 50 people for one role, 60 people, 100 people for one role. So we want to help our casting directors make sure that every decision that they're putting forth are the right ones, so that we can approve them, so that they don't have to go back to the drawing board. But sometimes it doesn't happen based on several things.
Yeah, and I'll add that, we love to put our trust into the casting team, and the studio and the producers and everyone they're working with. They have even more information when they're, deep diving in, like Grace mentioned earlier. And so when something comes across the desk that feels like, wait, I read that, or when we talked about that, I sort of saw that differently. And it's one of my favorite conversations to have, because having just, done it for all those years, I love to call the casting director and just be like, talk me through how you got here. So that way then I can go and sell this too, because I do love them. I just want to understand. And I love having that conversation because I love the brains of casting directors, and then being able to to relay that information to our creative teams and help them understand. It's really changed the shape of the shows that we've made, and suddenly puts a stamp or a tone, something on the show, especially if it's a lead role, that can then trigger the casting of so many other actors whom we might not have originally envisioned for something.
But can I just tell you something? And I learned this really early on when I became an executive, and I'm curious if you guys had the same experience. I remember, when you work in a casting office, you're really just honestly mostly engaged with actors. I mean, certainly you're a showrunner, but that's what you're doing. You're in auditions all day, you're reading people, and you're just such an advocate. And I remember when I became an executive, there was a moment when I realized, oh my goodness, the best read isn't always the actor that you cast. And I just remember it kind of blew my mind, because again, when you're in as a casting director, you're just so in the weeds, and you are just always evaluating the best audition. That's just where your brain is. But when you're an executive, it's just a big picture kind of look. And I remember there was a moment where I was like, well, that person gave the best read. It's so obvious. He elevated the material. It was. But I understood when there was a conversation about, but that's not sort of it doesn't feel like there are other X factors that just didn't kind of push that choice through, where somebody who, and again, we're not going to cast someone who can't act, but that somebody who maybe just had a particular kind of presence or look or charisma, honestly, because that was then chosen. I remember that was it blew my mind when I had that experience.
And I think as an executive, you have more information than the casting director a lot of times. You have, I've heard that second season pitch out while we're starting our first season. I've heard where this is going before that. So now I understand, which might not be information I'm giving the casting director right away, or might not be information that they're getting, but I know a little bit more of the bigger picture. So a lot of times that best read becomes, this is the best read of this side of the script of what we're looking for. But in the long run, it won't get us to where we are, because this becomes the bad guy in season 2, and you just don't know that.
Yeah, and a lot of times the difference between being the casting director to the casting exec is that, as a casting director, you're sort of between the actor, the agents, the managers, the director, the producer, whereas at the network, we're doing a very similar thing, because you want everybody to get on the same page. You want to be like, everybody hands in, let's go, let's hire this person. But again, it's, the longer that you work at the place you're at, the more you get to know those people, you understand the tone they're trying to set for their network and a standard that you're looking to set. And then you are then doing the same thing with the creative teams and the casting directors you're hiring for those projects to cast them. And then you're working, so closely with your network and marketing and all of those things that they keep mentioning. Again, we're like collaborator helpers is essentially what we do, and and quality control in some way, shape, or form. And
you guys clock certain things. I mean, last week we talked with the agents that were here that we still keep tabs on you. So even if you didn't get the part, right? Do you as casting executives keep tabs? I'm sure you guys do. And that person didn't get the part, but you know what? That person is really good. I'm going to keep them in mind. Or has that happened with you guys individually?
Yeah, I think, again, in our roles, we have much more resources than our casting director counterparts have. A lot of times, because we work at a corporation, we have bigger budgets. We're working on a different scale. So we're probably, I've been very lucky to work in the international space. So I know a lot of international talent that sometimes the conversation is, oh, have you seen this person? They're from Israel, but you wouldn't know them because they haven't worked here. Check them out on this thing. And then they're engaged and they're excited about. That's something that I do all the time.
That's great, because one of the things that we talked about last week is to work on your marketability. If you're elsewhere, like if you're from Mexico or you're from Israel or whatever, there's a marketability there. How do you sell? Because this happens a lot. It happens with me. It happens with a lot of casting directors. I just had to. Well, I can't say her name because I don't want to embarrass her. But I was selling a big actress, a big Latina actress, right? And my producers, who are not from the community, did not understand that, hey, this is a big person. How do you sell that? Are you encounter situations? How do you educate your peers on international talent?
I mean, sometimes there's just, you can just, there's a body of work to be able to point to. I mean, you can just, and there's also just, that if that person is accomplished and they just they're not aware of it, there's a way to, honestly, I'm always very much about people educating themselves about talent, showing them, even if someone doesn't have an extensive demo reel, even to see some of their taped auditions, there's other measurements for, I think, assessing talent. But in terms of what you're specifically talking about, if someone does have a huge profile, as a big star somewhere, there's going to usually be something to back that up. And again, it's usually, whether it's a demo tape, they're probably likely represented by a big agency. So there's other things to, I think, probably to help bolster someone's status if they're not familiar with the talent.
Yeah, and realistically, we want to set people up to win. That's what casting directors do. That's what we do. If we think that we see the promise there and we want them to be noticed, just the same way as a casting director might put a certain take you did first or a certain clip from your demo reel that speaks more to the character, in a very similar fashion, whether it's a bio or photos or your demo or anything like that, when we go to present that to our team, if we see that and we want to grab their attention, we're going to make sure that we're putting the good stuff up top, the stuff we know that will speak to them and speak to the project and sell the actor in an appropriate way.
I'm spoiled. I just emailed my international team and say, are they a big deal in Korea? They're like, yes. Great, thank you. I'm very spoiled, but I'm very spoiled because we have international teams. Right. And I've worked closely, with my group in India, when it's this is an Indian actress that is huge. And I have, working with Bella, who is someone who understands that talent. There's advocates for this talent within the company that then can help with the American conversation.
That's so nice.
It is.
No, it's true. And I was at a wedding in Mexico City, and I was getting to know someone who was a Netflix executive. It was the same thing. She says she talks to her American colleagues all the time, just to say this. Yeah,
this is a big deal.
Yeah,
you should hire them.
Yeah.
I'm very lucky though. Thank you.
Which is why I'm waiting to become an executive too, so I don't have to deal with this stuff. It's hard. So I get it why it's so frustrating. But if I could just say her name, but you guys will all die. And then it's and the fact that
Selma Hayek.
No, that would be really embarrassing. But it's something similar, very similar to that. But so the approval. I'm going back to the approval process because. So we casting directors have to be approved as well, by the way. And I remember actually years ago, I was doing a foundation class and I was like, this is what you do. And, not necessarily how to get approved, but be prepared and blah, blah, blah. And that night I got a call from producer, oh, by the way, we're thinking about you to do this and we're going to send you to the network for approval. And I was like, shit. So now I'm like, okay, is my resume okay? Is it good? It's I got to call some people, but what... Are you ready for this? What doesn't get an actor approved?
Oh, that's a good one.
I think it's if they don't fit into the world that we're making, the show we're making. Again, I never get an approval and I'm like, I hope I don't approve this. Yeah. It's not, there's no mustache twirly moment. It's more, it's more about just making sure that they fit into the world of the show we're making. And making sure that, they're within the parameters that we've presented and the show that is being made.
Yeah, it's so subjective, right? It is. That's a thing. It's it's true. None of us are dream crushers. It's just that just doesn't feel right. And especially if we're all because sometimes people have different points of view when I'm sharing it with the development team or with my bosses, and if it's collectively we're that doesn't feel right, then it's okay, clearly that's not right. We had a different vision for that role, so they need to keep looking.
And also, I've gone through the process where someone wasn't fitting that, fitting the puzzle, wasn't the final puzzle piece for the show. And, we had to go back. And then it was literally the next week, that person's name, they had also auditioned for something completely different. And they were like, oh my gosh, yes, they're actually so right for this. So, 1 week of getting not approved could turn into the following week getting approved. You can never really write an actor off, and assume that just because that happens on one project, that's going to be across the board,
It is. I mean, the point to this is like there is no formula. There is no like blacklist that we all have that person's not going to get approved. But it's really it is frustrating. But like, so I mean, it happened with me on a studio project, and it's like not approved. Like I got the phone call, like I don't get it. And it's like, okay. So I have to get on the phone with them and be like, so like, what is it? And they tell me like, well, it's because of this. It doesn't fit, the role, or we feel that maybe we got to get star casting somewhere else before this person is approved. So we're just, there's so many things there. So don't freak out if you ever, we try to protect you guys from that. Like if that ever happens, but like never take it personal, ever, is the bottom line.
Right. And if like we're not going to approve someone, it's never just like, no, it's always no, because specifically why. And also to be even more helpful, I want to then say, but would you consider this? And I'll give other ideas, a picture of the ideas, just so that, again, then there's just at least you're giving the producers and the casting directors some kind of information, or just so that they can kind of make like that it helps to inform their process. It's not just a door shut where it's done. It's like figure it out. It's like no, there's very specific why, and here's some actors that we actually can see in the part. What do you think?
And it's very collaborative. Like, I've gone back, and my creatives say, well, actually, we really feel passionate about this person, blah, 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 blah. So I have to call them back, like, listen, this is how my director feels, this is how my producer feels. And we set up a conference call and then say, okay, what's the argument? What? So let me bring it back and let me see. And sometimes it works. Like, it literally just happened like about a week ago for me. It's like, I went back. They feel really passionate about this. Okay, then they discussed and they told us like, this is our feedback, this is what we want to do. Maybe we'll bring them back and get what they really want to see, and then there it is, and it's approved. So, okay, let's see here. What is it like to oversee shows like Wednesday, This Is Us, The Handmaid's Tale? Like, what is that like for you guys? Is it fun? Like, what does the overseeing of those projects look like? Like Jenna Ortega, like that was like a big win. Like, how did
I've been very lucky to work on the projects I've worked on, and it's been cool to be a small part of these big projects and bringing that to life. I come from I spent 10 years in a casting office in New York, and then came over to the executive side, and the overview that you have at this level is huge, and the volume, especially at where I work at Netflix, is a lot. So being able to help help make those things happen and help the creative vision that these our creators have, right? Someone like Tim Burton saying he wants a Latina Wednesday, and how do we help him get to that place? How do we shepherd that vision? How do we make those things happen? That's my job, right? I'm coming up with some ideas, but I'm not coming up with the big idea. I'm servicing the show. And yeah, it's just been cool. It's been fun. Yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, like sometimes, like especially with a show like This Is Us, Dan Fogelman, who I worked with on other shows, like sometimes like when the script is just like that pilot was the script that was written and executed, so you just kind of get out of the way, and luckily he's got great taste and great instincts. And I think the only time that there was a real conversation about like, was Chrissy Metz's role. And I remember like seeing Chrissy, like to me, it was just like, that is Kate. Like there was just no doubt. And I actually remember that that the studio and the producers, because they actually had brought in two choices. But to me, like Chrissy was the one that had so much vulnerability. Wait, were you working on that at the time? Or?
I was at Bernie's office.
Yeah. There was, but it was just so clear because Chrissy just had that vulnerability. Yes, she wasn't like a seasoned actor, but I felt like it was so clear who that character was on that page, and you had to feel like the road ahead of her was going to be long, because she was just, there was just, I had that vision of exactly what she was going to look like, and there was just no compromising on that.
Funny, it's also helping our creatives make decisions, which a lot of times they're not ready, because I know now that the casting process is a first process that means this is real. Like there's people here that are going to read my script and it's going to happen. You can build sets, you can change them, and to all those people that do that stuff, but sometimes the acting part is the scariest part because you're committing to something. And on shows like This Is Us, you're committing to someone for 7 years, 22 episodes, right? 7 seasons. And on our stuff too as well, you know, you're committing to this thing that it's been also fun to help people make decisions. Why your choice is the best choice. And let me also show you some other things so you can be like, oh, that's it. That's the thing. I get it now. That's also been another fun part kind of this process.
Yeah, for me, it's the variety of things that I am able to work on now, as opposed to when I was in casting. You sort of have the projects that are right in front of you. Having this large spread of what is on our platform and what I am able to read, from comedies to dramas. By the time those scripts make it to me, the creative geniuses that are our creative execs and the creators and writers that they trust and know and love, by the time it gets to me, like, reading is fun, you know? It's like, I'm enjoying this. I haven't touched a book in a while, though. That part is what I've found in the past year that has really just fed me creatively, is seeing the span of what they're looking to make. And I think that the diversity behind the camera, the diversity in these rooms, the stories that they're trying to tell, it's really inspiring, and is such a it's like I can see the future. You know, it's like I know what's going to come out. It's not going to be until 2025, but like now I know, and I'm very excited about it.
So the next question is, I'm trying to like word it in a way that it's a loaded question. Are there any circumstances where you had to step in as a casting executive when something was kind of going rogue or awry? There's a lot of diversity stuff and diversity issues, and sometimes we have to like step in and say, this role is not this role is not authentic, or something like that. Does that happen as a casting executive where you could use your voice to defend that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I feel like, you know, especially now where I think people recognize that, you know, the talent pool is quite deep in any kind of role that you want to cast, you know, or frankly, you just have to take a risk. And even if you like, for instance, I remember when we were doing the pilot for La Brea on NBC, and the showrunner had written in a 16-year-old daughter who was an amputee. And, you know, I remember in our first casting meeting, I said, well, obviously we're going to cast an actor who's an amputee. And he said, absolutely. And I said, you know, knowing that it's this age, you know, someone hopefully 18 to play 16, I don't know how seasoned she's going to be, but I just want to make sure that you're committed to taking a risk on somebody who, again, you know, fulfills the role, may not be as experienced, but, you know, don't write her that long monologue that you have on page 6. Like, cut that down. Like, let's do everything we can to set up this actor for success. And so I felt like that was a good, you know, I was glad. I mean, I knew to have that conversation at the top, because we were gonna just kind of do a big casting search for this role. We found, you know, Zyra, who, you know, was an actor in Michigan who hadn't done, I think she'd maybe done some local commercials, and it's incredible. Like, I've just seen like the growth in her acting from season 1 to now our third season 3. So yeah, I mean, there's moments like that where you just feel like, this is great. I'm so glad you wrote the specificity of this role. We're not going to compromise on that, but then you do everything you can to support the actor.
I mean, that's really amazing that you did that too, because not only are you're freeing the actor up to do their best work, and then you're also freeing the writers and the creators and the directors to know where they can go and what they can do. So therefore, you're elevating that entire show by making that choice and call. That's really important.
And I think support for our casting directors when those things happen too, right? Like, okay, we're going to invest in an open call that's not just the United States. It's, you know, it's Australia, it's the UK, English-speaking countries. Also, we're going to invest in acting coach on set. We're going to invest in those things. So I think that's a part of the conversation that we're having a lot of times, because we read these scripts and they're all delicious characters, but sometimes you're just like, I know that doesn't exist as easy as you think it does. And that's the reality a lot of times, because a lot of times you get these scripts that other people have read and just haven't gotten to you, and they're like, yeah, here's this thing. Can you take a look at it from a casting point of view? And you're just like, where? And then you have to invest in that time, or casting timelines as well, right? This is something that's going to take instead of the 10 weeks that we usually do, it's going to take 15 weeks. So we're going to have to start this 6 months in advance so that we're servicing the creative and that we also set ourselves up for success.
And I'd like to shout out to all of the casting directors who are out there, because I think I can speak for all of us when I say that I do feel like casting was sort of on the front lines of trying to push for diversity. Like when I got into the business over 12 years ago, I remember that we always suggested people that might not have been exactly what was on the page. I think that, casting has been challenging that idea a long time ago. I saw it firsthand, and I learned from the people I worked for back then. And it's so nice that I feel like we finally caught up and we're like, okay, great. Welcome to the party.
Right.
Yep.
It's great here. Let's do this.
I mean, Cesar, you are really spoiled, because I wish that people could invest in our searches, and that must be nice to let me email my team and let me give you thousands of dollars for a search, because a lot of times we're like, my poor assistants and I are like literally going to powwows and the LGBT center and like doing flyers and stuff, just trying to get the sources. So there's a lot of that. And I think a lot of the times we find these groups, these pools of talent, and they're just not. The reality is they're not at the level that we need them to be, right? What's something that we can do to get them at that level? What are the conversations that need to be had and past that?
Well, I mean, I think like any, actor who's pursuing this seriously, you have to take the time to be invested in the work. That's whether that's taking acting classes, whether it's doing, and by the way, and I know, that there's a cost to that. So I've talked to actors who like, what I do, I couldn't, when I was starting out, I couldn't afford to like join an acting class. So I would just get with friends and we would just read sides with each other and kind of just like film it and critique each other. And that was how, and even he's now a working actor, but he still does this because he just feels like it's just a way to keep my mind like fresh and keep, just sort of never be complacent about my ability. So, I guess my point is just that like, there's always, if there's a will, there is a way. And so whether it can be free, because again, if you have a friend that you can be working with material on and you do it consistently, and there's also theater there's a lot of like, even theater in LA. I feel people always like, there's no theater. I'm like, there is theater here in LA that you can absolutely get exposure to work and, and just build your level of experience. Because when you get experience and you get confidence, and when you get confidence, you can go in the room and frankly then inspire confidence in casting directors when we see you. I mean, it's really, I feel like it's just a lot of those connecting those dots.
I think also it gives you a showcase. I've gone to plenty theater things that I didn't know I was going to and I ended up at, and it was like, that person's great. I never knew them. So I think that's another part of the conversation is what showcase are you creating for yourself so that people can see you, and also what body of work are you creating? Because that's another piece, I think, when you get to the levels of where we'll start seeing your stuff, there has to be a body of work. So what is that body of work that you're proud of, that you can show, and are you actively pursuing that?
It's just, because I'm sure everybody's jumping up and down now, like trying to prove something. But like, there's so much out there that there needs to be done. And I think that a lot of the times people are so worried about networking, which is, of course, it's important, but we forget about the actual craft. The actual craft of acting and what we do see that will get attention from us casting people, and then for us to be able to deliver to them and say, look, like they've done this and this and this is their body of work, and things that are impressive. And theater, yes, like I was amazed when Rosalinda Morales, Paulino Khan, and myself did Zoot Suit at CTG, and then they had us, Diana Ramirez, rest in peace, had us, could you guys want to do our open call? Because we do open calls or whatever. So I was like, yes, I'm ready. I just talked to all the actors who are like, I don't have work. So I'm imagining a line, right, around CTG, because it's an open call, right? Like anybody could come in and audition. And I showed up. There was 2 people. And one of them was a receptionist. Yeah. And she got the part, by the way. So she actually got... Yeah, we brought her in, and then we kept her in mind. We kept bringing her in, kept pushing her for Zoot Suit, and she got it. But a testament to like, what are you doing? Because I was so mad. I was like, I get so many complaints that I'm not doing anything. Okay, well, where were you guys? So it's and theater. Come on, guys. This is the core of it. So if you're just sitting around waiting for an audition, you're doing something wrong.
And also, don't focus. Like I always feel like when I meet young actors, one of the first questions if they don't have representation is like, how do I get an agent? And I always just think like, don't like that shouldn't be your focus. Like your focus should be on like what are you doing to just again like work either like doing scene study, getting a demo, like getting a body of work together. Like focus on being like a great actor, because I don't know, I sort of just really believe that like the cream always rises, just so that if you're actually good, you're putting in the work, somebody's going to notice, someone's going to figure it out. It may not happen today. It may not happen tomorrow. It might take a while. I don't know when, but you have to put in the work. Like that should be the focus. It shouldn't be on anything else.
Yeah, and a piece of advice I normally give too is I've had so many friends send me their demo reels, and they've either had a very small part or one line, and the demo reel is sort of just cut together where it's like they said a line, they said two lines, and it's so you can't get a real sense of like what can this person really do. And while it's great to show casting and the directors and everybody, oh look, I'm hireable, I'm not crazy, somebody hired me, always good, and your resume speaks to that too. I've encouraged friends of mine. I'm like, let me help you. I'll help you find you some scenes. What shows do you like to watch? Where do you see yourself on TV or in film? Or if you don't see yourself, like how can we figure out like how you can best show the inner life that you're able to bring out front for all of us to see. So I've had several friends do that and find pieces from plays or TV show monologues or things like that they just put on tape, and then people can say like, oh, they can hold a scene for those 2 to 3 minutes or however long, in addition to having the demo reel where it shows I've been hired by people and I'm not crazy.
So with this question, don't get crazy. There's no wrong answer here, but I'm leading up to something. Do you guys take generals?
Yes. All the time.
Tell me a little about generals. Like, I mean, I know it could be a quick hello. It could be a quick 15-minute.
I invest in a general because I'm trying to learn more about the actor and know who the actor is. But a lot of times the generals I'm taking are people that I'm interested in meeting with. So people that have a body of work, people that fit into the world that we're building, people that, are coming at a certain place in their career and taking that time. Because a general could take up to an hour, and that's an hour in your day, which is a lot of time for our days. We're only in the office from 10 to 6, some of us later, So it is very specific what it is, but I do them all the time.
I really like to do them because I like to hear directly from the source A to get to know them a bit, celebrate their body of work, but also get a sense of like what they want next. A lot of actors have done like this one season of something and they were so awesome at playing that role, and then maybe people can't see them in anything outside of that. And so I like to hear from the actor a lot of times, what are you watching that you love, and what do you see yourself in? What would you like to be your next thing? So that way when I'm looking at what's coming down the pike, I can be like, what, maybe they should read for that, and see how that goes. That's a big piece of it. Plus, I love actors. I married one. Before I got in casting, I met him. I did not cast my husband.
Disclaimer, right. No, I know. Same. I really like doing generals because also like sometimes when you've seen someone's body of work and you think like, well, great dramatic actor, likely humorless, and then you bring them in and you're like, oh my, yes. And I love that. That's always the humbling thing about what we do is like people just surprise you all the time. So which is why I love doing generals. And like even because I also oversee like the unscripted and I piece, and so it's great for me. Like if there's an actor on one of our shows who is hilarious and fun, and I just feel like, oh, this person could probably do something on the unscripted side. Maybe they could do like a host, like be on a panel for an unscripted show, or be on the red carpet, asking, talking to people. And then I'll bring them in for a general and get a sense of like, do you have a passion? And then I'll learn like, oh, I love golf, I love food or WWE, and then I'm thinking, oh, great, for the next event, where I need somebody to throw to who could talk to people, on about these specific subjects. Like you could do that. So I feel like I can only learn that if it usually starts with either like an agent or manager, sending me a reel if I don't know, and educating myself, or it's me seeing someone in a play here or wherever I've seen somebody, or watching a show and just deciding like, oh, I love that person, like I just like that performance, I just want to know more about him or her, or about them.
Yeah, those folks who haven't had the opportunity to go and be, charming on Jimmy Kimmel just yet, that they're not at that point in their career, they're not doing impression of Jennifer Coolidge on, a late night talk show or something. So you get to know them, and it's just, once you have that connection, you can then envision what they can do and where they could go.
And I say this because, like, don't first of all, do research is my big thing that I always tell actors, like, do your research, get to know, because a lot of the times the casting executives, unless if they come from Serafin's office or the Telsey office, they're not really known. I can't tell you how many times. I don't think once, if you've done my class at Foundation, when I said, I always do a pop quiz, do you know who Mary Vanu is? Yes. Do you know who Serafin is? Yes. Who's Laura Kennedy? Like, silence. Who is Stephen O'Neill? Who is, and they don't know. I'm like, do your research, because if you get a call from one of these assistants or coordinators or managers, and they call you for a general, it's a big deal. You don't know where that's going to lead you to. You might not get a part, you might not get an audition, but they will remember. They keep tabs. Those little personality traits, and you better believe it happens. Says, hey, because I call them if I'm in trouble. I call my peers and say, I'm looking for this and this and this. Who do you have? Like, actually, Amazon just gave me one person that read for a major part. That's how it happens. And so don't take it lightly. Do your research, and when that general comes in, take it seriously. Now, is it usually like the referrals or like how do you get to know your people that get thrown to you for generals?
It depends. I mean, sometimes it's like through agent or manager referral. Sometimes it's been after seeing someone in a showcase or theater. It even like sometimes it comes from somebody. I was just at a table read yesterday, and I hadn't seen this actor in a while, and she stopped me and just said, I remember when you brought me in for a general after she did a live audition for a pilot. She didn't get the job, but I brought her in the next day, and at first I didn't recall, but then when she told me the project, I said, oh my God, that's right. She was testing for a role. We went with another choice, but I just felt like this girl is so funny, so talented. I want to get to know her. And I remember bringing her in the next day, and she said to me, whenever my actor friends say like, ugh, what's the point of a general? Like, whatever happens. And she said, she always references the fact that like she didn't get that job, but that I brought her in the next day, and just because I was impressed and wanted to just figure out what other things we could work on for her. And now I love it. She's the co-lead of one of our comedy pilots right now.
Don't get crazy, you guys.
That's only happened once.
Okay, because they will tell me who you are, and I'll tell everybody not to bring you back. Okay, so we have time for one question here. Just give me a second. What are some of the big changes that you've seen presently in the industry that you think that we should be aware of, like from self-tapings to non-self-tapings? What are some of the big things that you've seen shift that are useful for actors?
I'm just trying to think of obviously the big shift is that like I'm waiting. I feel like some people are starting to do more in-person. Are you guys doing any in-person tests?
We've done them.
Yeah, we've
done them.
I know, and I'm wanting to go back to that because I miss that so much. I love because you get it's why I brought that actor in, because like I just could see her energy, feel her energy in the room. So I miss. And by the way, actors are really split on that, because some of the actors I know are just like, I never want to go back to in-person. Others are just like, please. So I feel like that's, I wish I could tell you what I hope we go back to more in person.
I think it'll start back up again. I think it's just a matter of logistically the way people have gotten used to working. Our producers, our directors are used to working remotely that sometimes that's the easiest way. I like them because you know how tall people are and how tall they're going to be in a room. That's really lovely. But I think I think we're moving into more of a hybrid model where as an actor you should know how to do both. Right, where both should be a flex. They should both be flexes, and you should be prepared for both, because you might have that in person, and the next week they're like, we can't fly you in, or we can't get everyone in the room, so we're gonna do it now virtually, and you still have to go through the process, right? So and I think also there's so much more content now, and with the streamers, with everything is just there's more content that as an actor you have to be even more versatile now than before. It's not just the simple thing, the 10, 12 things that were going on, and you're just like, I can do 30 Rock, I can do these shows that were so ingrained into the culture, but now there's stuff coming out all the time, so there's a lot of work for actors, which is really exciting, but you have to be able to flex now and have more flexibility, I think.
I totally agree. Also, did you ever have times when you were? I miss being in the room so much. Like times I had like an actor leave the office, and then I like finished the session. Then I was like, oh no, like I need them to come back because I just thought of like what they should do. Like call them and they run back in, or you're like, put your hair up, take that off. Here, let me get a makeup wipe. You know, like whatever. Because you're like trying so hard. You're like, I know that they're this role, and I want to help them get that. And there's that energy, you know, that while a self tape can be so moving because you're sort of watching a mini basic version of the movie without any props or sets or costumes, but you still get the same vibe. So I totally miss that. And the thing I see changing too is a lot of actors who are sort of taking charge. They're taking their careers into their own hands in so many ways because there is so much content. And I'm not saying everyone has to feel like they have to be the next Issa Rae, because not everyone is a writer, not everyone is a creator, but there are a lot of people in town that are. And if you know, you can be the talent and you can collaborate with people. And if you're auditioning and you're not getting it, or you're hitting your head up against a wall and you're feeling rejected, find those people around you. Try to build a tribe of people who are creators. If you're not a writer, have someone write something and you can act in it. I just see a lot of that happening with a lot of the actors that I know, and they send me these amazing short films or full films or shows they put on, and I think that proactivity goes a long way, because again, it's another opportunity for you to be seen. And I feel like now with the accessibility of being able to film things on your phone, or you know, getting creative tonally with something to make it work, I think that's a really big factor right now that makes a big impact for actors' careers.
Yeah, for sure. I never had to bring them back because I just wanted to do it. I had to bring them back. It wasn't me. It was another associate. Poor thing. I will never forget. Somehow, all the footage of the entire day's session was deleted.
Nightmare.
Send the self-tape in, and no one's gonna do that.
Oh, but it was the poor thing was crying like he thought he was gonna get fired. So we literally called, all of us jumped on the phones and brought them back, and every single actor made it in. So
that sounds like nightmares I used to have at the beginning of my career, honestly.
Yeah. So I'm looking at my co-hosts, so we're going to end in a second. But one thing that I will say about, you know, the hybrid way we do casting, the wonderful thing about this is that we have been able to see as casting professionals people that we never would have seen before. You know, we are looking at people in Montana and Oklahoma in reservations, you know, communities that never would have even thought that acting is a career. And so we've opened up so many doors. So that's the wonderful thing about that. But I just want to say I'm very honored to be here with you guys and to see this kind of representation as a casting executive. We have diversity, we have queer representation. When we would have seen this in executive levels. So very proud to be here with you guys. Can we have a round of applause for a wonderful panel, please? All right. Everybody, thank you so much for coming. We wish you well, make good choices, and we'll see each other very soon.